Hello and welcome to the Finance Quarter. I'm Andrew Robertson. Have you noticed how often you have to wait when you contact a business because the person you want to speak to is at a meeting? In fact, many business people spend most of their days racing from meeting to meeting, and for some it can take up to 80% of their time. Management consultant Dr. Ken Hudson has studied this phenomenon, and he questions whether many of those meetings actually add any value for either the company or its shareholders. Ken, you've spoken to many business people who've told you that meetings are the most unproductive part of their day. Why are they such a waste of time?
Well, business people, particularly in the corporate area, complain a lot about meetings. There's too many, they're going for too long and they're ineffective. I think part of the reason is they're just used to running meetings as a default mechanism of how to solve problems or make decisions, when in fact there may be other sharper, quicker, faster ways of doing it. They don't take it seriously enough, they're not trained in it, and there's no role model. So I think there's lots of problems with meetings.
What are those sharper, quicker ways of doing it?
Well, I think before you call a meeting, and I think a meeting is really a last resort, I think that you have to understand why you're calling a meeting, what are the goals of the meeting, and then maybe there's another way that you could resolve that situation. It could be an email, it could be a quick chat. One of the leaders I interviewed in my recent research basically said whenever he was asked to go to a meeting, he rang up the person and said, well, can we sort it out over the phone? And he said in about 50% of cases he could do that straight away. So I think if you're going to get a lot of people together, and they're expensive and it takes a lot of time, you have to have a really crystal clear purpose why you're doing it and what you're trying to achieve.
Well, there'll be a lot of business people watching this who'll be thinking, I have to talk to my staff and colleagues, I can't do all my business over the phone. So if you do decide that you need to call a meeting, what are the criteria you should be going through?
Yeah, excellent question. I think the crystal clear, or the very first thing you should do is to decide why you're having it. So the three things for me are why you're having it, what you're trying to achieve, what flows from that is who we therefore should invite, and how you're going to run the meeting. And it seems to me that a lot of people, a lot of organisations that I talk to, they don't do those four things. So people are not sure why they're at the meeting, they're not prepared properly for the meeting, they get frustrated because the meeting goes on too long and doesn't meet the objectives. But sometimes you just have to have a meeting because meetings are still really important. I mean, we're social animals, we need to meet and collaborate and interact. But we also need to meet the goals of the meeting. So meetings are very important. I don't think, strangely enough, although they're the last resort, most leaders don't take them seriously enough.
Why do you say that?
Well, I think we've been brought up with this idea that meetings are somehow an interruption to work, whereas increasingly in a sort of team-based, collaborative, democratised workforce, meetings actually, strangely enough, are going to be even more popular than less. So I think we've been brought up with this idea, one, it's an interruption, and two, somehow that it's just easy to run a meeting. When in fact, I think actually running a good meeting, planning a good meeting, getting the most out of a meeting is a key leadership skill. And it involves all the intelligence that a leader needs to have.
Once you decide that you do need to have a meeting, how do you ensure that it achieves its goals and really adds value for the company?
Well, I think the very first thing is actually to say, look, let's change the length of a meeting. The default meeting time in most organisations is an hour. And I've talked to an enormous number of managers and leaders over the years, and I kept asking, why does that meeting have to be an hour? And no one actually really can tell me it. I suspect the real reason is because of Microsoft Outlook, that it's set for an hour. So now we have a tool telling us how long a meeting should be. So one of the things we're doing with one organisation, for example, is reducing their meeting times from an hour to 45 minutes. You can save 25% of your time and you can get as much done.
Is it fair to say that one of the central tenets of your argument is that meetings are like any endeavour in life, and if you want to get the most out of them, you've got to put in the hard work and the preparation beforehand?
Absolutely. I mean, the great irony for me is that managers and leaders are always saying to themselves, look, we're time poor, We're under pressure and pressure to do more and more with less and less. And yet the very thing that occupies 70, 80% of the time meetings is the one thing they don't actually want to invest in. And I just don't understand that. I just think it's crazy. The very first thing, if I was running an organisation, would be to train our leaders and managers into becoming effective planners and being able to run meetings, and I think they have to be world class at this. The other thing too is why run meetings if you don't want to be world class? You know, leaders want to be world class in customer service and customer satisfaction and their products, but somehow want to be ordinary in running meetings.
Well, finally, there is one meeting that you do advocate, and that's a 10 to 15 minute so-called huddle at the beginning of every day. Why do you think that's important?
Well, the benefit of the leaders that run this is that paradoxically, they find that by running a daily update, they can actually have fewer meetings during the day. It's more proactive. They can solve problems before things come up. It gets the team together. You can have a key message for the day. And anyone that wants to run a meeting, sometimes by just having that short sort of kind of speed meeting, if you like, saves them from having a longer meeting later on. So I think it's actually, if you're in a fast-paced world, you've actually got to run fast-paced meetings, and a daily kind of scrum, if you like, daily meeting is a really good way to go.
Well, Ken Hudson, a lot to think about there. Thank you for meeting with us today.
That's right. My pleasure.
When it comes to adding value, there's one meeting all listed companies are required to hold, and that's their annual general meeting. It's the once-a-year chance for small shareholders in particular to meet with their board and management, but attendances are plummeting and are now at record lows. So is the AGM a dinosaur, or does it still have a meaningful role to play?
This meeting is an opportunity for you as the owners of the company to express your views to the board and management, and through me, to question us.
However, not many of AMP's owners were at last week's annual general meeting to hear Peter Mason extend that invitation. AMP has nearly 1 million shareholders, only a few hundred turned up.
I think the original reason they were developed was as a communication to shareholders, and being the only proper vehicle is now well and truly sort of a moot point.
Attendance at annual general meetings has been falling for many years, with the latest figures showing it now averages less than 0.5% of shareholders. Chartered Secretaries Australia's Tim Sheehy says the annual general meeting has become a victim of advances in both technology and the Corporations Act.
Financial information, strategic direction and so forth is communicated to the market continually in this country. We have a regime of continuous disclosure, and for that reason and distance reasons and so forth, I think a lot of shareholders no longer see a need to get that information from going to a physical venue like an AGM.
Annual general meetings are also a place where small investors in particular can feel their voice is not being heard. Corporate governance firm Regnan says an example of that is the proxy voting that occurs before the meeting, which means votes taken on the floor are meaningless.
A lot of the decisions are in fact made in advance by larger shareholder voting blocks, the institutional investors who've already lodged their proxies. So when you think about what's left for the AGM, you can understand retail investors in particular feeling quite disenfranchised.
Sushila Perez da Costa believes small investors also feel disenfranchised if their questions and concerns are not being addressed at the AGM.
Institutional investors tend to have quite good access to directors and management outside of the AGM forum, and so are able to ask their questions and convey their views, often ahead of the AGM. The AGM is really the only way that retail shareholders can do that.
Another reason why there are many empty seats at most annual general meetings is that they can frankly be very dull. Procedural matters like approving the accounts, electing directors and voting on the remuneration report can take up most of the meeting, with shareholders given very little time for meaningful interaction with the board and management.
I think you have the regimented attendees that will attend to go through the procedures, and we obviously have the monitors of each of the companies that attend, and you'll have the people attending. But, the procedural issues are dull. What people really want to know are the issues surrounding the company.
The question is how to make annual general meetings relevant again. Well, while attendance is falling at annual general meetings, it's apparently becoming harder to get directors to go to board meetings. According to the Institute of Company Directors, its members are being put off by the increasing liabilities they're now exposed to, which is potentially a huge problem for many companies.
Small companies, newly listed, the risk is high. They have new products, new services, possibly in an area of new technology, and there is a high chance they may not make it. So the directors with the greatest experience that could really help these companies are concerned about what happens if they get into difficulty, what happens if they get into trouble. I'm liable. Do I want to risk everything I have to help this company?
Well, still on directors, and it seems diversity has a long way to go in the boardroom. A new survey has found that 60% of directors have no policy on diversity, which for at least one champion of female equality just isn't good enough.
What gets measured gets done. Things that are in policies get measured. They get reported on, and if they're not in policies, they're going to get caught up in all the other priorities that we know that exist in organisations. And so gender diversity will just slip down the ranks along with the optional or the nice to do, but not necessary to do. And that's what concerns me. I really think we have to, make a commitment to formalising these policies and saying this is what we stand for as an organisation, this is what we as a board have committed to, and this is what our actions will reflect.
Now, just one final point involving directors before we go. Succession planning is a huge issue for all businesses, no matter how big or small. Nobody knows when a key management person is going to be hit by the proverbial bus, and if no thought has been given to succession, it can be a disaster. David Jones had that experience last year when Chief Executive Mark McGuinness resigned in disgrace. But DJ's director Katie Lay says the company was well prepared.
Well, we've done succession planning at David Jones for a number of years, very comprehensive, 1, 2, 3 layers down within the organisation. So I think it's really important that when unfortunate circumstances like there were last year for David Jones, that the company was still robust enough to be able to step forward with a new CEO within a week.
Well, that's it for another edition of the Finance Quarter. If you'd like to write to us about anything to do with money or business, our email address is thefinancequarter@your.abc.net.au. And if you'd like to see any part of the program again, you can find us on the ABC News website. Just go to the business page and click on the Finance Quarter icon. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on the Finance Quarter.